because they're outside of the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. So they're not in the spirit, right? Spear and spirit, right? Spear fishing, the great fisherman, okay? Feeding the people with the fish and the bread, okay? You see that they're not in the divine order. Okay, verse 12. The wicked desire the stronghold of evildoers, but the root of the righteous endures, right? Revelation 22, I believe it is. I am the root and offspring of David and the bright morning star. So what is the root and offspring of David, right? It's also the root of the righteous. Okay, so it's righteous intensity that's that core driving force. And you need to understand that for Proverbs 34. That is key there. And people miss that. It's not this lukewarm stuff in church that, they're really just wicked. Okay, so remember that they're changing my voice again. I went over. This is part 4. They're sabotaging me, but you should be able to kind of follow along. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep going, as opposed to recording all this stuff over again to fit the 10-minute timeline. The 10 minutes I'm allowed on TikTok at this time. And, to avoid that confusion. It's not that confusing, so I'm going to go ahead and continue. So we left off on, it was verse 12. Because it's Proverbs 11:12. The wicked desire the stronghold of evildoers, but the root of the righteous endures. Going down to verse 18. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Again, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So when we look at Proverbs, again, you have to break them down, right? In Proverbs 1, it talks about the parables, the riddles, the sayings of the wise. These are things you have to analyze, and you have to put them in context and connect it to different parts of the Bible. I'm pretty sure you understand that by now if you've been following this series the whole time, especially if you've seen it on my other videos. So they talk about the double-edged sword of Scripture, right? So the Scripture is a sharp double-edged sword. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, right? So they're the swords that would be chosen by reckless people. Maybe a broadsword, just swing it with brute force, not using your head. Okay, maybe a short, thicker sword. You got to put it in context, right? There's one thing that's interesting is the mind, body, soul, spirit stuff is here subtly and otherwise. It talks about Benaiah having grabbed a spear from a 7-foot-plus Egyptian and having killed him with his own spear. It describes Goliath and his height and his massive, strong person. Okay, it talks about David being but a little boy. But Christ is above David, right? So it says the root and offspring of David and the bright morning star. So what is the idealized champion of God? We see in Psalm 19 talks about a champion. Well, it's someone who's mulatto from a black African patriarchal line who is going to reach the pinnacle before tech, breeding, cheating, generational ill-gotten gains, etc. ruin everything. And you see, the peoples who came up with the computer, that's part of their tree, were instrumental in the final destruction of natural living, right? You see the people who coined the term eugenics, right? So we see these whites and Jews and LGBT people coming out with all these technologies, right? And some of them are Asian, what have you. They almost account for all the technologies that have brought about the end. And that by itself doesn't damn a people. I'm not racist, I'm part white. But you need to understand the difference between people who depending on nature and God and people who depend on technology and exploit people, bringing up ideas that have to do with nature and God. You have to understand that or you're not going to understand the Bible. And if I didn't go over that, then I wouldn't be doing it justice. Okay, that is the part of the justification for me saying that. Justice and the words justice and justification are connected in this way. Again, no offense to anybody. This just needs to be said, and that even has to be said to understand Proverbs 11, I guess it is, verse 18, where it says the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The tongue, so the action. So what is happening, right? When you're sick, they tell you drink a lot of fluids, right? You take a shower. If you don't, you might get dirty and you might get sick, right? And you see with homeless people, they get thrown off when they don't take a shower. Martial artists, right, had to purify water more than other people. Why? Because they had to drink more water because it's the most demanding exercise, especially if they're in Egypt or Africa and it's very hot and they're walking around and so on and so forth. And their kind of physique, is similar to that. So it takes on new meaning when you're an African martial artist when you say that stolen, when wicked people say that stolen water is sweet and food eaten in secret is delicious, when these famines in Somalia and Ethiopia and, the places close to Africa like Yemen, you get what I'm saying? Okay. And so what is this healing, right? And we look at the word healed, it's an anagram for he lead. Who? Right? It's the person, you know them by their fruits, right? Which goes back to water and the root, right? And the tree and the leaves and the fruit. And then you can make, juice with the fruit, or you can eat the fruit. Okay. They make fig trees, they make clothes with the fig leaves. Okay. You got the sticks to help you train sparring, sparring with a stick for, actual combat with a double-edged sword. And we see this in the various martial arts styles, various Japanese and Chinese where they have wooden swords. And it was the same thing with African martial arts, Tatib, right? In Egypt, right? Wali Tatib or something like this, where it says the art of being straight, forward, and honest through the use of the stick. Okay. So just look up Tatib, Tahtib, and you'll see that this was understood. And of course, the crossing of the sticks, when you stick fight, the cross, Jesus on the cross, the wood, the tree of life, what have you. So the tongue of the rise, right? The tongue, right? And of course, there's saliva, and the body's made up of water, and there's a lot of connections here. So it's the pure water versus the muddied water of the wicked, the polluted water, the water that the prostitute in Revelation sits by. Okay, so he who's controlling the waters is saying, no, don't throw pearls to swine. Don't give pure water to the wicked, not pure spiritual water, right? And you see these churches that worship the devil. They pretend they're doing the right thing when they baptize in water, but they're not baptizing in the water of God, but merely the water of man, which is a sewer system, right? A system and cistern, as some occultists have pointed out, that's connected. Their system is actually based on the sewer system. You can't make this up. So recently in Los Angeles, it was 8 million pounds of sewage, 8 million gallons of sewage was poured out into the waters. And they allowed for that to happen. They foresaw that, right? We saw certain political commentators speaking on it leading up to that, right? In California Insider, for example, and there must have been others, so I'm just going to assume that there's many others. And they said, yes, that's happening, and no one's doing anything about it. And lo and behold, it kept gathering, it kept building up till there's a ridiculous amount of it in the water, and they had to clear the beaches. Okay, because, I kid you not, it's connected to the sewer system. Now, I don't want to get too nasty with it. No offense to anybody. No offense to the LGBT community. I hope you do the right thing. But it also connects to LGBT sex. And I'll let you figure that out on your own. Okay. So, talk about being pelted with filth and so on and so forth. Okay. So, and again, the penis is also a phallic symbol, right? How is it used, right? What is the justification? What is the romantic justice when you go on a date and so on and so forth? So the words of the reckless are the sword that destroys you, right? They're piercing, like using scripture wrong, having their own religious book, which is incorrect, instead of mine, where I point precisely in a clear and concise and rational manner to universal moral truths, which makes it a valid, moral, spiritual, godly, and holy book. And my applications are obviously immaculate, pristine, definitely on point. Okay, so the healing comes when you obey God through me, right? The spiritual water, right? Drink from my well, right? The water from the rain clouds of God that purify, that cleanse, that purge you of that wickedness, okay? That's the good water. That's where the healing of the wise, right? The fruit of the wisdom, okay? The fruit of the wisdom is righteousness, and the fruit of righteousness is wisdom. And we see that also around chapters 10 and 11, where it talks about the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and wisdom is the fruit of the righteous. Okay. So Proverbs 13:14, the teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. So again, you see the water, right? The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life. Okay, and whose hands have gathered up the wind, who has wrapped up the teachings of the wise in a cloak, right? To adorn the wise, to adorn the worthy. Okay, those who obey God through me. Those who don't obey God through me, it's concealed, right? Cloak and dagger, it's concealed. They don't see it that way. They kind of see it, but they don't truly see it for what it is. Like if you have some kind of weapon under your cloak, for example. Okay, so correction, it is Proverbs 12:18 and not Proverbs 11:18, because a bunch of white supremacists are mad because I won't help them do the wrong thing, which is convince people that magically, that their people are chosen or something so they can abuse kids in the church, abuse women, rape and abuse them in corporations and everything else they do. They're making it so it's harder for me to kind of read my notes, and they're fuming me, and there's a lot of things going on that you don't know about.